Radio broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. Mali's special court on financial and economic crimes sentences 5 people over a 9 billion CFA francs cotton scandal. President of the ECOWAS Commission, Toure, engages President Bouaké of Liberia to calm political tension.
The former president underscored his commitment to peace and security, as well as to democracy and democratic consolidation. He will do everything to preserve the peace and security of Liberia.
Women's rights organizations in Niger welcome the government's policy of free delivery for mothers at public health centers.
Pregnant women will no longer be at home to give birth and will be happy to go to the maternity hospital, hoping for a warm welcome. So, it's a relief for us women in Niger.
And several Western countries pledge hundreds of thousands of vaccine doses to Africa to curtail the spread of Mpox. Please stay with us for details of these stories and more.
Here is Abdullahi Hassan with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and a warm welcome to our listeners in Ghana, Liberia and the Gambia. We'll begin today's bulletin. Now, a former member of the Junglers, a death squad of the former president, Yahya Jammeh, will go on trial next month in the United States of America. From the scheduled date of September 16, 2027, Michael Sankoria will appear before the court for charges of rights violations, including torture. This marks the first time a non-U.S. citizen will stand trial in a U.S. federal court for torture committed abroad. From Banjul, W.Ida Sankulejanko reports.
Korea, a former member of the Junglers, a notorious death squad under former Gambian President Yahya Jammeh, is charged with 6 counts of torture and 1 count of conspiracy to commit torture. The indictment alleges that following an attempted coup against Jammeh's regime in 2006, Michael Korea and other Junglers tortured suspected participants in the coup. The suspects were beaten, suffocated with plastic bags, and subjected to electric shocks. The trial is scheduled to take place from September 16 to 27, 2024 at the Alfred A. Araj United States Courthouse is seen as a critical step towards securing truth and justice for victims of Jammeh's regime. Korea's case has drawn significant attention from human rights advocates and legal experts, as it is the first trial of a non-U.S. citizen since the Torture Act was passed in 1994, and only the 3rd trial under the Act. The U.S. government filed the charges under the Extraterritorial Torture Act, a criminal law which allows it to prosecute individuals found within the United States for acts of torture committed abroad. As a reminder, the former Gambian leader's administration is accused of committing widespread human rights violations, including enforced disappearances, torture, extrajudicial killings, sexual violence, and arbitrary detention. For Newslink West African Democracy Radio, I am Sankule Janko reporting from Banjul.
In Mali, Bakary Togola and 4 co-other defendants have each received a 5-year jail term and slapped with 10 million CFA francs fine in the so-called cotton producer rebate case. The verdict was handed down Tuesday by the Special Court on Financial and Economic Crimes in Bamako. 4 other accused persons were acquitted after the reclassification of the facts as embezzlement of public property, a decision that did not satisfy Togola's legal team. Nadir Tete has put this report by WADR's Bamako correspondent Aliu Cham.
A marathon trial came to a close on Tuesday at the Special Court of Financial and Economic Crimes. Although the trial was due to end next Friday, the court finally delivered its verdict early. Bakary Togola, former president of the Permanent Assembly of Malian Chambers of Agriculture, and 4 other co-defendants were sentenced to 5 years in prison. They were also ordered to pay 10 million CFA francs in fines. The verdict was rejected by his lawyer, Laji Traore, who denounced the recharacterization of the facts.
It's a decision that in itself does not satisfy us at all. I do not dispute a decision of a court of appeal or any jurisdiction, but I am sure that this decision today gives reason to the first judges who acquitted them because they were prosecuted for public good. Today, the judges also cleared them for public good by disqualifying the case by entering into the path of a criminal condemnation, namely the abuse of social property.
Four other co-defendants were acquitted by the judge. Bakary Togola's lawyer Laji Traore announced that he will appeal the decision.
There have been so many systematic violations of most of the articles of the Act on Cooperative Societies. Therefore, it is obvious that in our role as lawyers, we cannot let this happen. We will submit these rights to the Supreme Court, which will act on them as it did during the first hearing.
Bakary Togola, nicknamed the King of Cotton, was convicted in the case of rebates to cotton producers to the tune of 9 billion CFA francs.
Now the detail with that report filed in by our Bamako correspondent Aliou Cham. And now to Côte d'Ivoire, ECOWAS resident representatives have been in a conclave since Tuesday in the town of Aseni as a prelude to an upcoming special summit of the sub-regional organization. For 4 days, they will reflect on how to make the organization more effective in the service of its people, in alignment with ECOWAS Vision 2050. Echatisu tells us more.
Some 10 resident and permanent representatives from the Economic Community of West African States are taking part in this meeting to consider the future of the sub-regional organization's regional integration policy in the face of new regional and global challenges. Fanta Cisse is the ECOWAS resident representative in Côte d'Ivoire.
What are the ECOWAS achievements and how can we improve what has been done for the past 50 years? We need to think about what new measures we should take to strengthen our community and also improve the participation of citizens in all the activities we carry out in our jurisdiction.
Participants will also discuss a possible withdrawal of Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger from ECOWAS. The three military-led countries have formed the Confederation of Sahel States and are due to officially leave the West African Organization in January 2025. Abu Kole is the Director of Cabinet to the President of the ECOWAS Commission.
The preference of ECOWAS is that we remain united so that the citizens of the sub-region continue to benefit from the achievements that we have all contributed to put in place. Even if eventually these countries decide to leave, there will always be this collaboration between them and the other ECOWAS member states. So, we need to find a way to have this dialogue between ECOWAS and the member countries of the AES.
The participants will then report on their discussions and proposals to the ECOWAS Commission for presentation at the next summit. The findings should further drive ECOWAS's Vision 2050, which aims to be more at the service of the people.
A chat to that report filed in by WADR's Abidjan correspondent Albin Ade.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Remember, we're live on WADR.org and on Facebook at WADR English Service. A high-powered delegation of the Economic Community of West African State, ECOWAS, headed by its president, Dr. Omar Aliou Touré, is calling for calm in Liberia amid heightening political tension between the main opposition, Congress for Democratic Change, CDC party, and the new government. In recent days, the opposition supporters and state security operatives have been engaged in clashes which have resulted in the arrest of 14 opposition figures and injuries to many. From Monrovia, Darlington Popper reports.
Immediately after arriving in Monrovia, President of the ECOWAS Commission, Dr. Omar Aliou Touré, proceeded to the executive mansion where he met with President Joseph Boakai. Speaking after their meeting, Touré revealed that his trip was just on time following a complaint filed by the former president about the ongoing situation George Weah in the aftermath of the Thursday's violent riot called on the sub-regional body to intervene while demanding the unconditional release of its party members. The ECOWAS chief said the bloc is deeply concerned in monitoring the development.
The former president underscored his commitment to peace and security in Liberia, as well as to democracy and democratic consolidation. He has recommitted himself to that. He will do everything to preserve the peace and security of Liberia.
Presidential Press Secretary Kula Fofana, on behalf of the Liberian presidency, assured the ECOWAS delegation of the government's commitment to reconciling all disputes among Liberians.
He assured the delegation that his government remains committed and to make sure Liberia is peaceful and that everyone, irrespective of political orientation and where they are, who they are, where they come from, they will all be a part of the Liberia he's trying to build.
Meanwhile, it should be noted that the August 22 face-off between agents of the Drug Enforcement Agency and partisans of the CDC at the party headquarters was initiated by a drug search and seizure operation in the area. According to a government statement, several people were reported injured and others arrested. The ECOWAS mission is expected to release an assessment report of its one-day mission to Liberia in the coming days. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Darlington Pogba in Monrovia.
Right here in Senegal, President Bassirou Diomaye Faye is convening the National Assembly tomorrow, Thursday, to examine the bill abolishing two state institutions. These are the High Council for Territorial Communities and the Economic, Social and Environmental Council. The decision was taken to honor a campaign promise to rationalize state spending. In the meantime, the debate is lively in the country. Professor Musa Jao, a former political science researcher and professor emeritus at the Gaston Berger University in St. Louis, Senegal, explains what's at stake.
Non, ce n'est pas une bataille gagnée parce que ce sont les Sénégalais qui doivent s'exprimer.
No, it's not data that is going to be lost because it's the Senegalese who have to express themselves to give a comfortable majority to the executive. So that means that in every election, there are uncertainties. Nothing is won in advance. And in this case, we are facing a report of force because the Constitution authorizes the president to dissolve the assembly after 2 years. And after 2 years, it gives its calendar of September 12th. That is, from September 12th, the president can dissolve the National Assembly. But we are in a situation of rivalry between the two institutions and the president. Let's put the assembly in front of this political responsibility to dissolve the institutions that were created or supported by the outgoing MPs, which is a choice that will be difficult for them. Will these deputies hold their heads up? Will they say, here we are not dissolving? Then that will be an opportunity given to the President of the Republic to say that there are tensions between the executive and the National Assembly because there is a conflict between the two institutions. This is the first case. The second case, if the Assembly accepts to modify the Constitution, that is to say, to dissolve the two institutions, then the dissolution of the National Assembly can only intervene from September 12th. In any case, politically, the president has his hands tied, given the configuration of the institutions. And we are waiting for the results of this consultation and the decisions that will be made from the presentation by the president on the matter.
Professor Musa Jao is a former political science researcher at the Gaston Berger University in St. Louis, Senegal. And on the security front, for the African Military Law Forum to discuss the role of legal advisors in the deployment of troops to missions is underway in Lusaka, the Zambian capital. More than 13 African countries are represented at the event co-hosted by the Zambian Defense Force, the U.S. Africa Command, and the North Carolina National Guard. Participants at the conference that opened on Tuesday include military leaders and magistrates. AFRICOM's Deputy Legal Counsel, retired Colonel Max Maxwell, says it is critical to ensure the rule of law is followed when troops are deployed. Maxwell said promoting professional conduct is crucial for a successful mission. The 7th African Military Law Forum is being held at a time when the United States is bolstering military and security ties with African partners. Africa is battling increased instability, particularly in the Sahel region, where jihadi insurgency has ramped up attacks. You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM Dakar, Senegal. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Mali's Special Court on Financial and Economic Crimes sentences 5 people over a 9 billion CFA francs cotton scandal. President of the ECOWAS Commission, Touré, engages President Boakai of Liberia to calm political tension. Still ahead in the news, women's rights organizations in Niger welcome the government's policy of free delivery for mothers at public health centers, and several Western countries pledge hundreds of thousands of vaccine doses to Africa to curtail the spread of mpox. We also have the press review, guest interview, and a sports update. Please stay with us.
You are listening to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal.
Many thanks for staying with us. In Ghana, the National Identification Authority's proposal of using the identity card, also known as the Ghana card, in the compilation of the voters' register has been strongly resisted by the opposition National Democratic Congress, NDC. Appearing before the Assurance Committee of Parliament, the Executive Secretary of NIA, Professor Kenneth Ageman Atefua, said with over 18 million young people captured, the Electoral Commission can create a credible register on its data. However, the opposition believes a majority of Ghanaians have not received their Ghana card, hence disenfranchising many citizens from exercising their constitutional right. And now to health news. It is good news for women in Niger as the government announces free delivery for expecting mothers in public hospitals. The measure takes effect in September 2024. Several organizations in the country advocating for women's rights have welcomed this decision. However, some are hoping that the decision will be respected. Francis Boniface has put this report by Niamey correspondent Murtala Zubairu.
France, Germany and Spain have pledged thousands of doses of the mpox vaccine to African countries suffering from the current epidemic. In a statement on Tuesday, Spain disclosed a donation of 500,000 vaccines to Central Africa without specifying which nations in the region will receive the vaccines or when they will arrive. Also, France and Germany both announced that they will each donate 100,000 vaccine doses to the continent. While outbreaks have been reported in Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda and Uganda since July, Liberia, Cote d'Ivoire and Nigeria have all reported cases. The United States Agency for International Development on Tuesday donated 10,000 Janus vaccines to Nigeria as part of efforts to mitigate the spread of mpox. The Director General of the Nigerian National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, Dr. Muyi Aino, said the distribution will commence immediately, prioritizing states with the highest cases and frontline workers. Formerly known as monkeypox, mpox is an infectious disease caused by a virus transmitted to humans by infected animals that can also be passed from human to human through close physical contact. It causes fever, muscle pains, skin lesions, and in an increasing number of cases, death.
We sincerely apologize for that. It's a mix-up. That was actually a report by Imoedet regarding the contribution by members of the European Union and the United States pledging support in the form of vaccine donations to African countries battling the current mpox outbreak. The support comes on the heels of the continued spread of the viral disease, including in Europe and Asia. Let's now take you back to the report from Niger.
Free delivery in public hospitals is a relief for Anima Diofo, whose citizens' organization has been fighting for this for several years. This decision will bring relief to many women who often give birth outside hospitals for lack of funds, thereby increasing their risk of complications and even death. Anima Diofo, one of the leaders of the Niger Battling Women Network.
Pregnant women will no longer be at home to give birth and will be happy to go to the maternity hospital, hoping for a warm welcome. So, it's a relief for us women in Niger.
For midwife Mariama Suleiman, free delivery in public hospitals will save many pregnant women the financial expense of giving birth.
Lorsque tu accouches à la maison et qu'on t'amène à l'hôpital. When you fall asleep at home and are taken to the hospital or health center with your child, you have to pay a certain amount so that the nurses can take care of you and your child. See if you are okay. If your child is okay because you gave birth at home, you have to pay a certain amount if someone doesn't take care of you. Now, this free service will relieve a lot of women. Va soulager beaucoup des femmes.
Zaina Amadou, a pregnant woman we met in the streets of Niamey, now hopes that this measure, which takes effect at the beginning of September, will be respected by public hospitals.
We are watching the health workers. Above all, we expect the authorities to ensure that this decision is respected. We expect the authorities to respect this decision. Otherwise, it won't be applied.
The free delivery policy in public hospitals by the military regime is a first in Niger, a country with the highest birth rate in West Africa. According to UN data, 441 women die per 100,000 live births due to pregnancy-related causes in the Sahelian country, grappling with a multi-layered crisis of poverty, insecurity, and impacts of climate change affecting women and young girls.
Francis Boniface with that report by our Niamey correspondent, Murtala Zubairu.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
Well, for our press review segment today, let's join W. Adias Sankule Janko in Banjul, the Gambia.
Let's begin with the Fourier newspaper today, and the lead story on the Fourier newspaper reads 2016-2030 education policy and the realities in public schools. That is the lead story on the Fourier newspaper. Spanish Prime Minister Barroso to sign MOU on secular migration today. Migrant boat capsizes off Libya coast. That's another story. This other one reads UN to give Gambia $36 million for peace building. GNPC operates as trader oil marketing company, MD reveals. Let's move on to the Point newspaper for today's edition of the press review. And the lead story on the Point newspaper reads, Finance PS highlights Latin Petroleum Depot issue. PS is the Permanent Secretary of Finance and Economic Affairs, Mr. Jallo. IGCI confronts Bag Finance boss over Salibo allowance. Tourism Minister threatens to ban horse riders. That is another story on the Point newspaper. EcoBank Gambia Limited partners with central government to launch digital payment gateway for efficient revenue collection. And this other one reads, regional institution heads want extra allowance for civil servants. Let's take a look at the final newspaper for today, and that is the Standard newspaper. And the lead story on the Standard newspaper reads, Army explains checkpoint shooting. Well, a shooting incident was reported at about 2 a.m. earlier this morning involving some youngsters who were driving. And according to the army, when they approached the checkpoint, they refused to stop. And then they felt threatened, and this led to a shooting, targeting the tire of the vehicle. But unfortunately, one of the passengers of the vehicle was shot on the tire, but is in no danger, according to this other one reads, CBG, that is the Central Bank of the Gambia, quarterly report indicates drop in domestic foreign exchange market. Inquiry hard, Ministry of Finance officials not aware of change in fuel importation policy. And finally, ECOWAS tells Ghana to disclose information on 2005 massacre in the Gambia. I'm afraid these are the major stories making headlines on Gambian dailies, and it's back to you in the studio.
Many thanks, Sankule Janko.
Politics,
Analyses on major news,
social matters, and all. This is a guest.
Our guest segment features Aaron Weir, a Liberian political analyst who weighs in on the ECOWAS delegation's visit to Liberia amid heightening political tension. In recent days, the opposition supporters and state security operatives have been engaged in clashes which have resulted in the arrest of 14 opposition figures and injuries to many. Aaron speaks about the significance of this mediation.
I think it's a domestic matter. It's not as alarming as President Weah had made it to appear. I think this is something that's clearly within the authorities' ability to resolve. I don't think, and I think this is why the ECOWAS delegation is very keen to clarify the purpose of their mission here. They were following up on initial promise made to visit when the Deputy Minister for International Cooperation and Economic Integration met with the ECOWAS delegation sometime in Nairobi. They had been planning this meeting for a while, and it happens at the time that former President George Weah had requested ECOWAS intervention in what is clearly a very domestic squabble between the CDC, the former ruling government, and the incumbent Unity Party-led government, or issue over the approach. I mean, what is basically being said here is the way the government approached the warrant the DEA received to go and do a drug bust on a ghetto that is adjacent to CDC headquarters. So this is essentially domestic matters that it's not really, that doesn't really call for ECOWAS intervention, if you ask me.
Don't you think that still somehow that the reason given by the former president seeking ECOWAS's intervention is valid, knowing very well that Sierra Leone will soon host some 1,000 ECOWAS standby force to prevent any coup in the country, which at least the government reported twice already in the last 12 months. We saw it happen in Guinea-Bissau and other countries of West Africa. Most of the cases actually started as domestic matters, but they are of regional concern because militaries have taken over. So don't you think his reasons are valid?
Do you need to tell ECOWAS that? That is my point. And I think what we're dealing with here is just there's a lack of trust. The way the transition happened, I think there's a lack of trust between we as CDC and the Unity Party government. So at that level, there may be trust issues. But I think, and that's where I think the government made a mistake in the way they approach the tip-off they receive on the issue of drug. I think opposition parties should be considered a major partner in the fight of crimes. And the CDC felt overlooked. And the CDC is as popular as the Unity Party-led government. We saw that in the elections. And you have a point there. The ECOWAS may be looking at the complaint coming out of Liberia, as a red flag in a wider context of a sub-region that seemed to be going back to the days of military government. You see Mali, you see Burkina Faso, now we have Niger. Liberia is 20 years after the peace agreement. We've held the 4th democratic elections. We were able to pull through. But does that mean that we cannot go back to some kind of conflict? I mean, it's possible. It's very possible. So you have a point. ECOWAS could be reading a lot more into this because ECOWAS is predisposed to the kind of intelligence that you and I do not have.
Aaron Ware is a Liberian political analyst. Now, in the world of sport, Nigeria hired German coach Bruno Labbadia on Tuesday to lead the men's national soccer team in a bid to get its flagging World Cup qualifying campaign back on track. Mohamed Sanusi, the General Secretary of the Nigeria Football Federation, NFF, says the appointment is with immediate effect. The 58-year-old Labbadia has been out of work since April 2023 when he was fired by Stuttgart after failing to arrest its slide to the bottom of the Bundesliga. Nigeria second from bottom in its 2026 World Cup qualifying group after failing to win its opening 4 games. And that's how we come to the end of this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Krista Mukidi and Maojo Juvo for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via social media platforms, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook, WADR English Service. We also stream live on WADR.org. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is our gender program, 50-50 with Nadire Tete, to be followed by the Single Digital Comprehensive News Packet in French, Info Chez Vous, with Demba Amar, and at the top of the hour of 1 p.m. I'm Abdullahi Hassan. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via